they knew about this. They knew about this, and people were still flying in those birds. I've flown in those birds. A lot of the Rangers and stuff have. And there's good things about them. Obviously, they're scary as fuck. And, but we shouldn't have, I don't know. I mean, I've just been in them when they've almost crashed, and it sucks. But if you're wounded, they come get you and they fly you out there way faster than a helicopter. So that could save someone's life there. But they should have fixed this gearbox shit. It's bullshit that they were letting these people fly these planes around. They didn't have the proper training to know that this gearbox thing could happen. They knew that catastrophic failure could happen. The risks were not mitigated. And so all these families don't have their guy. Hi, everybody. This is John Coney back with Real Veteran News. Here with three of my veteran friends this week for our 4 veteran news analysis discussion. And we got a little bit of diversity this week because Shane was in the Navy, so that's good.
Hey.
All right. So nobody's new, but Shane hasn't been around in a while. So Shane, why don't you introduce yourself first?
What's up, guys? I'm Shane. Live in D.C. and used to be on the earlier part of the show. But glad to be back. And former Navy guy. Worked in crypto for a couple years in the whole SIGINT world for about a decade, and now just doing consulting in the cybersecurity landscape. And happy to be on board with you guys. So happy to dive into these little articles.
Yes, Shane is a good shit talker, so we should be good to go for some shit talking today. All right, Chuck, my precious liberal for the weekend here. Chuck, and I've been fooling around with these other liberals. They're nothing like you.
Thanks, John. I'm Chuck, U.S. Army veteran, was part of the invading force in Iraq, and after I got out of the military, I moved into cybersecurity specifically, did that at State for a long time. I'm doing consulting now, and it's good to be here.
All right, and lastly, Dr. Matt.
How are you doing? I was in 375 for 5 years, got out, became a paramedic, and then went to medical school. I'm living in West Tennessee now.
All right, so the topics for this week are Trump altercation at Arlington National Cemetery, update on the Trump versus Harris presidential election campaigns, a little bit of a slow news week because it's Labor Day weekend, but we have time to talk about UFOs, UAPs, and then there's some general military news at the end, kind of like a military news wrap-up at the end. You guys ready to go?
Let's do it.
Ready to go?
All right, cool. So I assume all of you saw Trump at Arlington National Cemetery. It was the anniversary of the Kabul 13 that got killed, 3 years, and also coincides a lot with this channel, or not this channel, but like these videos in general. But Trump was at Arlington National Cemetery in Section 60, been there a lot, and there was this altercation with a female person who worked there who I'm going to go out on a limb and say is probably black. To me, I mean, just like, if you've been there, like, basically they pushed past this woman. She tried to stop them from bringing professional photographers, and they apparently had warned them before that they weren't supposed to be doing these campaign stuff out there. So it seemed like there was this like slow motion car crash coming, where it's like the Trump campaign was coming, the Gold Star families wanted Trump there and had invited him. They don't like Biden because of the, everything. Arlington National Cemetery knew this was coming. They had this policy. Technically, it's against the law. Nobody follows these like political laws. And there's no like crime or punishment for this, I believe. But it's basically you're not supposed to be doing this. And he went in for the photo op. And he also did his like thumbs up thing, which like people didn't really like in the graveyard. So who wants to go first?
I'll go through.
All right, Matt.
So Arlington is a sacred space, and I appreciate that. But I've seen from my early childhood till now, hundreds, if not 1,000 politicians go there and do a photo op. I feel like if you're just there to pay respect to a veteran, probably no pictures have been taken. I've taken pictures of individual graves of guys I know when I've been there, but I've never taken a selfie or had somebody take a picture of me.
Well, this is political activity. This isn't like Matt and John go down and take a picture by Buddy's grave.
Agreed. And I'm distinguishing what I do versus what I see politicians do all the time. And I've never heard of a politician being confronted by security. I would ask, and I don't know the answer to this, is this an actual law or is it a statute or a rule that was written by whatever agencies over Arlington? And if so, are they uniformly enforcing it? Which I'm going to go ahead and answer. They probably aren't. It's just Trump.
It's a law. It's a law. They're basically not supposed to be doing politics in the cemetery.
Right. So did Congress write that law, or did the agency write a rule based on their authority to govern that area? It's two different things. I think it's mildly distasteful for any politicians to do political ops there. I think it's incredibly distasteful for the first politician ever to get in trouble for it to be prosecuted by Biden admin after all the other lawfare they've thrown out. The lawfare is very transparent. If he were to tear the mattress label off of one of his mattresses, I think the SWAT teams would come in on him at this point. And I don't think the American public likes either of those things, either the photo op or the lawfare. But if the Gold Star families are inviting him, I think he should go.
Here's my biggest issue with this, and this is, I think, a consistent theme with Donald Trump. What are we talking about right now? Donald Trump. We're not talking about the Gold Star families. We're not talking about the anniversary of a tragedy. And it's almost nowhere in the media. What the discussion is about Donald Trump. And he seems to be adept at getting all of the discussion to be about him all the time. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but he is always the center of attention. And these are instances where, as a man who was or wants to be again president, he should be backing out and not taking the spotlight on an issue like this, right? Making all of this about him. I also find it, just say what you will about whether you like this law or not, right? It's a law. Yes, do presidents go, vice presidents, other government officials who happen to be politicians go and give speeches at Arlington National Cemetery on holidays? Yes. But I think this feels a little more politicized, a little bit different. It also feels to me like it changes when he and his staff are specifically told that this is prohibited activity and they engage in it anyway against those prohibitions. I also find it personally crazy that this convicted felon who is out on bail waiting for his arraignment to come up is now engaging in flagrant and public violations of federal law. That I find to be a little bit crazy. And I hear the argument that Donald Trump is somehow the only person targeted in these things. Donald Trump breaks laws in a way that other people have not. You can say what you will, right? These are actual violations of law, and they are occurring in a way that we have not seen in the past. So of course, unless you're just going to give him a bye because he's the first person to do it, right? Then you have to enforce some of these things. I do not think, and I disagree entirely, that the general public thinks that Donald Trump is being persecuted in some way. There are people who believe that, but I think by and large, people see Trump violating laws, being held accountable for that. And I must say that, his conviction was by a jury of normal Americans. This is not like the Biden administration put in place some kind of right. This is a jury of ordinary Americans who found him guilty on the charges that were brought up against him in a court of law after hearing all the evidence.
You got your perspective, and then they have their perspective, and everybody sees it from their tints.
Absolutely. But once again, the problem is this is what we're talking about, right? Like now this is a discussion about Donald Trump and whether he's a felon or not a discussion about the anniversary of a tragedy and the loss of 13 soldiers, right? That's what we should be focused on here. And we're not talking about that at all. We're talking about Donald Trump.
Both of you guys are right. First and foremost, the thing that we're talking about, I want to take the first 30 seconds that we're talking about the situation that's happening at the cemetery, not talking about the most important stuff that we need to talk about the candidates as far as policy, economics, what they do for the border, what they do for international trade, tariffs, all that fun stuff, right? All the media attention is just going onto this silly, this is nonsense that all the news outlets are now covering this as this big theatrical thing. Like, guys, there's a photo op. How about we go and question him on his policy, and we get Kamala to go and sit down for a lot more interviews to see how we can elucidate what she actually thinks instead of just being, just a robot for the Democratic arm. I'm not saying Trump's any better. I think both candidates are pretty much terrible. All right. So, but in the end, this whole stuff at the Arlington Cemetery, was it rude? Yes. Has other politicians done it before? Many times. All right. So the fact that we're still concentrating on this is a little bit silly. And so let's just go ahead and pay attention that all media outlets are covering this. All right. And so we need to go ahead. If we want to talk about both candidates, let's talk about their policy. All right. So that's what I just want to attack on.
Cool. Just follow up a little bit and then we go back to Matt because he had something to say. But I mean, obviously Arlington National Cemetery is important. Remembering everybody's important. We got to be careful not to get too upset about sacred totems because, at the end of the day, it's just a field with 7 graves on it. And, we have this federal law that says you can't do this or that, which is kind of like a ceremonial law. I mean, it's in bad taste, obviously, but he obviously did it on purpose to capture the news cycle away from Kamala Harris, who had that long tail coming out of her, coronation and everything. So I just want to bring this up. So the woman was pushed aside. To me, the question is, who actually made this physical, right? Because if she's pushed aside, she's placed her body in between somebody on the campaign and where they want to go, right? I mean, she's obviously told them they can't do it. They know they're going to do it anyway. She's essentially put her body in between them. She's subsequently pushed aside. I mean, who is instigating the physicality of the altercation here? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. In a way, another reason why it's she didn't press charges. I mean, it's which I get. What do you think, Matt? What do you think about who started it, and should this person have put themselves physically in between the politicians and the graves there?
That's a wide open area unless they were at some choke point that she was blocking. But I think I would probably walk around a female before I put my hands on a female and push her aside. Again, though, my question is, did Congress pass a law saying this, or did they give some agency authority over Arlington National Cemetery? And this is some minor rule on page 1073 of all the rules around Arlington.
Oh, it's a law, dude. It's a law.
Well, my understanding is that there's just a general law that's not specific to Arlington National Cemetery, right? It is all military burial grounds, and political activity, engaging in political activity in any of those areas is prohibited. That's my understanding.
Yeah. It's one of these one-liners that goes in an appropriation bill. They got to pay for all these cemeteries, so they're always passing laws to pay for them. So they just put in there you're not allowed to do any politics in a cemetery. That makes sense. I mean, it makes sense, but Trump obviously is pushing buttons. So
what's actual political speech? And if you're invited by the 13 Gold Star families to be there, and you go there and you lay a wreath, and that's all you do, is that political speech? Is the documenting that you were there with photos or videography, is that political speech?
He's got campaign photographer.
No.
I think that was the line, yeah. The difference was that it's not – so he went and did activities that otherwise would be perfectly acceptable, but he specifically brought people he deemed as campaign photographers who took images and videos that they then uploaded onto his campaign website and campaign social media profile, very specifically for that, including a long speech by him going over the activities, talking about how he was good and Biden was bad. It was a very, very clearly partisan political, framing of this with the stuff he used from that event.
Let me play the other side of it. A recent assassination attempt was made on him, and he was invited by dead veterans' families to go out in an open air area at personal risk to himself, and he did. Why wasn't Biden invited by those 13 families? Out of 13 families, not one of them said, hey, I'd like Joe Biden to be there or Kamala Harris?
No, they all hate him. They all hate him.
But
they get their kids killed.
Okay, well, I think that's the main point today is Joe Biden got 13 Americans killed.
Young Americans. Innocent.
I would also be careful about that. I don't think that's an accurate assertion, right? I think that there's blame to be laid at the feet of a lot of people in this. And I think Donald Trump certainly has blame as well. And while these individual families may not blame Joe Biden, and I can't speak to that, right? That's the assertion that you guys are making. I can't say that that's true. But while let's say that is true, then it's important to remember that does not absolve Donald Trump of responsibility for this.
What's more disrespectful? Parents asking him to come lay a wreath and he does it and he takes pictures? Or when their coffins are coming off of the plane when they get back to America, Joe Biden's falling asleep and looking at his watch, wanting to know when the ceremony will be over?
So first of all, that's a mischaracterization. And second of all, what I would say that I think is most insulting and most unfair is taking those images that he had of those families and the actions he took and layering over an overtly political campaign speech on a TikTok that he posts onto his campaign social media, talking about how Joe Biden did this and he does that. That is taking that and flagrantly politicizing that activity.
We lost 13 great people. What a horrible day it was. We didn't lose one person in 18 months. And then they took over that disaster, the leaving of Afghanistan.
That, I think, is probably where we should take a step back. Also as we just kind of agreed as a group, by a man who bears some responsibility for the deaths of these people, right? So standing up and trying to defend himself, it's making it all about him. instead of about the problem, instead of about the soldiers, instead of about the families, he's making it about him. Everything has to be about him.
Hey, Shane, so the Army tried to be classy about it, said it was unfortunate. And then the Trump campaign talking about the woman that got in the altercation with, they were basically called her mentally ill and despicable. Mm-hmm. What do you think? What do you think about that? They're going in.
Yeah. So like, listen, a lot of these, and I got a few friends who are in the Trump campaign. A lot of these staffers are young. They use hyperbolic language all the time, right? So if people take them like at their word, she's sick and despicable, and they take them like as verbatim, like, oh, they genuinely think she's sick and despicable. They're just kind of throwing, she was a weirdo, she was a drama queen, right? She's making a mountain out of a molehill kind of ordeal, right? So I think maybe like either they nudged her, to try to get in the way, and she just kind of like pushed back, and then just personality just kind of get out of hand. Probably two young 20-year-olds just getting out of hand, and all of a sudden now the Trump campaign's like, shit, I'm now going to deal with this, all right? So we're making that amount of molehill on that one. But when it comes back, I want to circle back just real quick on the blame of Afghanistan and the Gold Star families. John, we talked about this before. The blame lies with the military generals and admirals who were lying to the public and to us about how the entire 2-decade campaign was going, and that the enlisted men and the younger guys were saying, hey, boss, I think the people that were dropping a lot of money to train and to put the weapons in, they don't know how to read or write, and they're kind of taking our money and run with it. They reported up to lieutenant, which is their captain, on up, and you know what they say? Things are going great. They're going really good. And yes, a lot of good things did happen in Afghanistan. We actually did a wonderful job trying to educate the young girls and get a Western-style, somewhat democracy going in there. No matter how small it was still a very vital and strong Western-style like democracy there. And there was a lot of great things that came to that. I wish we either put too many boots in there or not enough. But the whole it was Biden's who came out. Biden was the cherry on top of the incompetence. It was the incompetence all the way up the chain of command. People who lied and bullshitted their way just to get the money. They fucked over young U.S. airmen, Marines, Army soldiers, and sailors all the time trying to be truthful about what they're saying. And the generals and these officers who were just fucking everyone over. The politicians are lying to us saying everything is going great, when really all what happened if the Taliban came, it turned into a ghost powder. All right, the ANA was garbage. The Afghan National Army was garbage. They had a few small group, about 2,000 special forces guys who were absolutely dedicated and who went down heroically, and we absolutely love those guys. We brought them back over here. But Joe Biden then doing a piss poor job, just pulling everyone out, not trying to even do it surreptitiously. We're just kind of doing a very sloppily, lazy, leaving everything out. I'm like, come on, we could do way better than that, right? But the Trump campaign didn't do a good job either, or the whole administration. And it goes back to the Obama administration and to the Bush administration, all right? So let's stop pretending like all these guys are heroes. They're all human beings. They're all mostly incompetent, and it's the best that we have. So like Matt and Chuck, you guys are both right, all right? But let's just call them out on the bullshit, all right? So the administrations are all to blame. Biden did fuck up, and we need to acknowledge that he did that. And it's okay saying that. So that's why the Gold Star family members were pissed.
Next topic is the Trump and Harris presidential election campaign. To go over the recent polls, which are mixed. Some say this, some say that. Basically, Harris is doing well with women and Hispanics, and then Trump is doing well with whites and men. National poll is 45% Harris, Trump 41%, but national doesn't really matter because the Electoral College. They got 7 battleground states they're looking at. In the Reuters poll, Trump is leading in all 7, and in the Bloomberg poll, Harris is leading in all 7. Democrats are 70%, 73% of them are more excited, and Trump polls better on the economy, and Harris polls better on abortion. So it's basically what we would imagine. We're kind of just waiting for this October surprise to come, I guess, right? We're all expecting something to happen. But right now, they're kind of basically tied. I don't trust the polls, and it's kind of what you expect. So, Chuck, what do you think about the polls?
Yeah, I think this is a story about something that we all know very, very well, which is this is a tight election. It could go any way. Bringing Kamala Harris into the race, Kamala Harris entering the race, changed the dynamic, changed the nature of it tremendously, generated a lot of excitement among the Democratic base, and plucked off some of the moderates who were looking at Trump. And that tightened things dramatically, and here we are. That's kind of the story, right? I personally think it feels like this is going to go right down to the wire, but I am heartened by the fact that I think Harris has momentum at this point and the polls are moving in her direction. They seem to be relatively stable since the convention. She is the one who's, moving in the positive direction right now, which is the thing to pay attention to, right? Sometimes it's a little less about the numbers and more about the direction. But again, like you said, polls are not always accurate, especially polls of Donald Trump. Most of these are national polls, and the national polls, Republicans have an advantage in the Electoral College right now, and so the Democrat has to be polling well beyond the Republican in order to guarantee a win. The Republican can get less votes and still win, and that's just not true based on the way things break out right now for the Democrat.
Matt, what do you think about the polling?
I trusted polls until about 2008, and after that, I feel like the only poll that matters is the one that occurs on Election Day, and they're so biased. I guess you can take an amalgam, but I mean, if your guy's looking too good, then your constituency gets complacent and doesn't turn out. I think we need every single person to vote and get out to the polls. I would wonder if they have time with Harris coming on this late to reprint all the pre-printed ballots that they're going to mail in and stuff drop boxes with. So I don't know. I don't trust polls.
Shane, what do you think?
There's some polls that are horrendously biased. Others, there's some pragmatic pollsters out there that, I don't know, I guess sometimes I try to trust 538s here and there, but they're hit and miss. I think to Chuck's point, so I listen to, there's another great podcast out there, Breaking Points, that they pretty talk about like the R's have been undersampled by about 3 to 4% on general, just because like you call someone up, like, hey, who are you voting for? And these Republicans are usually like, fuck you, I'm not answering, I'm voting for Trump, click. And they wouldn't count that as, like as a yes for Trump. So that's like that they noticed like over that historic fail, especially as the 2020s, like just terrible job, and especially in, all the presidential elections. So I think it's going to come down to the wire. I personally, if the Israeli war is still going on, I think that may drag Harris down just because there's a huge faction of the Democratic Party that's pro-Palestinian, right? It's a younger generation that's on there, and they're just not. They may be on that vote blue no matter who trained, but I know they're really getting pissed. And if if escalates beyond that, the current administration is going to have to. And you keep sending weapons to them, then they're going to be up pissed, and they may just sit down and vote for a write-in or whatever. So, but if they get a peace agreement, then I think they got it in the bag right now, at least because of that momentum. But it's going to be, coming down to the wire over there. And
pure politics wise, I personally think whoever is the underdog wins. I think if Trump is the underdog, I think Trump was the underdog in 2016, won. I think he functions well as the underdog. He didn't campaign as well in 2020 because he was the president. He wasn't really the underdog. If Kamala Harris can become the underdog plausibly and a fighter, I think then she can win, right? It's like whoever can be that. So like they're both going to be kind of like wrestling to be like known as the underdog. And with Kamala, it's kind of like she raised $500 million in like a month. So it's kind of like, and backed by all these powerful people. So it's like, how does she cast herself as an underdog? Obviously a lot riding on the debate. The main thing about Kamala, the poll is like, who knows, whatever. The main thing with Kamala is that in order for her to be a historical figure, she's not a historical figure or some great American leader yet. We just lost Matt. Well, he's not talking right now. Anyway, so she's not a great American leader yet. She's not Abraham Lincoln or one of these like big leaders. She has a chance here, but she has to like grab her place in history, which her place in history is beating Donald Trump. Like if she can beat Donald Trump, she becomes this historical figure, this American leader, also the first female president. But this manicured, facade where they have like the interview where she's got this babysitter and they're just running over everything with consultants. She's not off the cuff. She's not off script. She's not going out there and fighting and doing interviews, making herself available to people, giving herself a chance to mess up, right? She's like not letting herself mess up. And she thinks that she can just coast through the election and just not mess up. I don't believe that'll work. I believe that she has to get out there, talk to people, put herself in vulnerable situations and prove that she's authentic and prove that she's an American leader, because she hasn't really proven that she's like a top American leader.
She doesn't have to prove this.
She's basically put up for president, but like hasn't been through the primary process, isn't even the most popular person in her party. She's kind of just like fell ass backwards into it. So she needs to step up. She's been stepping up. but she's going to have to beat Trump, and she needs to be regarded as an underdog.
I would hope that whoever's over Arlington charges Trump with a felony for every picture that was taken, and he gets more trial. Like, that would make him the underdog again. It would be so much campaign finance money for him. I don't think Harris is competent. I don't think she can do unscripted interviews and come off that way. I don't think she's a capable leader. I think she's an administrator and the default head person right now, and there's a team of people running the administration that it's in their best interest to have no turnover and keep her there. I don't think she has it in her what you're describing to show the public. I don't think she's capable of it.
I don't think so either, but I'm just saying.
Obviously, I'm going to disagree. I do think she's capable. I do think she's qualified. I do think that she's demonstrated that. However, what I'm going to agree with is I do think she is best in her unscripted moments sometimes when she lets in a little bit of vulnerability. I think there's a lot of pressure, particularly among somebody like a woman running to be the first female president, running to be the first black president, a woman running to be the first person of South Asian descent to be president of the United States. There's a lot of focus on always being perfect, and it can be hard to shake yourself out of that, I think. I think when you see yourself as a part of that affinity group, it can be difficult because you feel a whole lot of weight to get everything right all the time, and it can be tough to get out of that. And for me, I have a little bit of grace for that idea, and the thought that it may be tough to just be normal, right? And what happens? She goes out and laughs, and you've got Trump berating her about how she's a lunatic with a crazy laugh and she's unhinged. Come on, she's laughing. To me, those are some of her most relatable and best moments, when she's kind of giggling about something that her mother told her when she was little that actually is a relatively kind of like profound statement, but put into, a little like South Asian package about coconuts. I think those are some of her good moments, and so I'm going to agree with you that she would be well served to have more of those.
Matt's a doctor. He's talking about the vaccine. Let's talk about, okay, so we're saying that Trump's attacks are getting nastier. They're saying that he has put out a couple of attacks on Truth Social. He's basically resharing like nasty memes about Kamala Harris. One of them had like a blowjob theme, stuff like that. He's not typing out specifically stuff, but he's like beating around the bush, kind of like attacking her and some of the other Democrats. So he's amping up the nastiness. We haven't gotten close to the election yet. I told you guys, he's got to get dirty. Like this whole making fun of everything's fair game. Kamala's laugh is fair game. She has a bad hair day. It's fair game. It's politics. It's control of the most powerful country on the planet. Nobody wants to lose. Everything's fair game. What do you think about the nastiness level, Shane, of the increasing nastiness? She seems to not be engaging in it, but Trump is dialing it up. What do you think, Shane?
I love it. We got to have context is everything, guys. You got to remember some of the commercials back in the 1960s where you used to have, what was it, the little girl who was counting down 3, 2, 1, and a nuclear bomb going off or whatever.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 6, 8, 9,
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
These are the stakes. To make a world in which all of God's children can live, or to go into the dark. We must either love each other or we must die.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
Was that the Nixon campaign or something like that? Remember, we are tweeting at each other, right? That's the worst that we're getting, right? Other countries are assassinating, they're having coups, they're doing all kinds of other barbaric shit out here. Our former president who's getting so much shit is literally just tweeting at people, and then the EU is just having all this kind of authoritarian, take it down, we can't have these words out there. Let him tweet, all right? Let him talk shit, and let her, if she wants to be higher, elucidate your policy. Say you are a child, do you want this to be as your president? And go ahead and say and articulate your way of why you should be the POTUS and not just like the Democratic Party arm and just being a general, it doesn't matter who you are. Right now, if you look at predicted, she's going to win, right? She's got a 54%. If you want to go and buy that share. So if you're a betting man, bet on Kamala. All right. But if Trump wants to do this, gaslighter, all right? Because he's pointing out to the fact that she's using superficial cultural kind of agenda and pushes to nominate herself, which she may be a good person in general, right? And I'm not saying she may be an okay president if she gets in there, but she doesn't elaborate on literally anything. She hasn't done any interviews, all right? But she doesn't have to, John. She doesn't have to, because right now, why would she? She's going to win. If she just coasts, she's going to win.
Yeah, she's in a coast.
Let's be fair about this, though. Trump does not elaborate on his policies either, right?
Correct.
Trump came out with what is being deemed as a policy about in vitro fertilization. He said, we're going to give it to everybody. Somebody's paying for it. That's not a policy, right? So his policies have the same level of detail while you're claiming hers do, right? So that's number one. And number two, I'm going to agree with you that I think, thank goodness this is only tweeting each other. However, let's all remember that we had a violent mob attack the Capitol on January 6th, incited by the former president of the United States in order to attempt to maintain and control power. That is exactly what you're talking about occurring in other countries that we don't want, which is why Donald Trump is a problem moving forward. If for no other reason, I think this guy should not be back in office. He should not be back in office. And that seems to be the same position that almost all of his cabinet has taken. And he has a new vice presidential candidate because the previous one wouldn't run with him again because he didn't work to stop the violent mob from trying to kill that man inside the grounds of the Capitol, right? So these are like serious things, and we should not be forgetting.
Chuck, do you really believe that?
I do 100%. Yes. Every bit of evidence has shown it. I don't know if Donald Trump fully intended to incite the mob, but he certainly actively attempted not to prevent. He did not prevent it. He did not stop them. He did not get on TV and tell them not to do it. He took no actions that day. And by all accounts, sat back and watched it with some level of glee.
So when he asked for National Guard to be there and it was denied by Pelosi, why would he do that? Why would he ask for more guards to be on the ground if that was the case?
He didn't. It was requested.
That's not what happened.
I mean, Trump didn't request the National Guard.
Do you think there were federal agents fomenting violence on January 6th? We know that there were, so you're aware of that.
He's asking about false flag. You believe in false flag January 6th?
I do not believe in false flag, and saying we know that is, I think, a gross exaggeration, a gross misrepresentation of the facts, right? You believe that to be true. We do not know it, right? Let's be cautious about that. Excuse me? I'm not going down some conspiracy theory rabbit hole because I'm here for facts, information, things. I'm not going down a conspiracy theory rabbit hole.
Whether or not they had agents on the ground undercover. I've seen several videos of obvious agents doing stuff and being called out as being feds.
Yeah. Okay.
So you claim.
All right. Everyone's got their perspective. Worst day in history. It was great. It was whatever. You know what I mean? Everyone sees it from their lens.
What about Trump being assassinated? That's stuff that only happens.
All right. We're gonna stay on topic here. All right. Let's go on to the UFOs. You guys get ready for UFOs? All right. Shane loves UFOs. We're doing UFOs. That's one of the reasons why I was able to bring this. And Shane loves the UFOs. All right. Got a couple articles, a couple topics about the UFOs. A lot of this is because there's a new book coming out by the main military investigator UFO guy, Luis Elizondo, who's been, I think he testified last year, and he's been putting a lot of stuff out, right? So his book's coming out. Now, he's selling a book, so, it's got to have all this interesting shit in it, but I generally trust this guy. He seems like a straight shooter, I guess you could say. In the 1960s, he's saying senior White House advisor Harold Malmgren, who worked for several administrations and had the highest security clearance, was informally, he says, he's still alive, he says he was informally briefed about essentially alien tech programs, recovered alien technology, going all the way back to the 60s before all of us were even born. All right, and this goes back to, I just think this is the biggest cover-up in human history. I don't really know what's going to happen with it when it does break or whatever. I think people are ready for the truth, but we'll see. All right, so Shane, since you got a boner for UFOs, what do you?
Let's go. All right. Well, first of all, just pure bias, right? Like I want to believe, right? Like I love the idea of space. So everyone's biased in their own perspective. So this is just my own bias just coming out. So just take it for what it's worth, right? And always see a situation through multiple lenses and multiple perspectives. Never take one thing as the truth. But I always just kind of see that when you look into this, what John brings up is, this is another example of a credible government official coming out and saying like, hey, there's something there, right? We had the former Canadian Secretary of Defense who came out and said like there's a whole civilization out there, and there's a government-wide thing. You're like, okay, that's a little weird. You see former 20-year fighter F-18 fighter pilots who are very serious, guys, and they don't want to be out there, and they're going on like we've seen, these things tracking with not only our own radar, but the radars on the ships and the radars on the ground. So you have credible CTCs, these communication guys, these radar operators who are looking out there, and they're confirming this. They're coming out to work, right? Just the enlisted personnel. So now you have a confluence of, hundreds of former military officials and guys ranging up and down the chain of command saying, hey, there's something that I'm just noticing that's breaking the laws of physics. And when is enough to say raise the alarm bell? Like, this is probably either a national security issue that we need to go and take a look at, or is this a global, this is going to flip the world upside down, or is this we need to put on the tinfoil hat and I just need to figure out how to read science better, right? Like, which one is it? And so right now, you say there's aliens, you're a tinfoil hat kind of guy, right? But if you believe incredible 20-year captains in the Navy who are coming out and saying, my radar tracked this guy and I've never seen anything break this, like other fighter pilots saying we all saw the same thing go out in public and put in their reputation as they're in their careers. Like, they just got out and they're saying this publicly. I don't know, right? Are we crazy or are we not? I want to believe that that's awesome and it's a whole nother chapter of human civilization. That'd be dope. It's also could just be, it's complete bullshit. It's all fairy tales. People are on it for their own personal gain. And, we just need to trust the science. So that's what I believe on that one. I just see another credible official. If you're advising presidents for decades and you're coming out and saying, by the way, yeah, there's an alien. I'm like, hold up. If he's advising presidents on international politics, like how many other people are coming out? Like, let's have a serious conversation. But I've had other friends in the agencies who looked at me, part of the Arrow program, and saying, Shane, no aliens. I've talked to my guys. We don't have anything. I'm like, okay, you're a bud. I trust you. But what about all the other shit that's out there? The New York Times one, and they're like, well, thumbs up or this emoji. So that's kind of where I stand with that.
All right. So Matt, this guy Luis Elizondo said himself experienced, after taking over this military unit investigating the UAPs, UFOs, that he encountered green glowing orbs floating inside his house. Like, they were in his house. This is the guy who wrote the book, who was in charge of this unit, and apparently has seen all this shit and is trying to essentially alert the country. So what do you think? What would you do if you had the green glowing orbs, Matt?
Probably self-reflect and go back and review my security video footage after the fact and make sure that none of my rye bread had molded. So as a scientist, and I'm a physician and I've got tons of undergrad hours in hard science, I get frustrated when I hear people say, this did something that's physically impossible. So when a pilot sees something and says it did something physically impossible, my question is, did it do something it accelerated in a way that from Newtonian physics isn't possible, or something that they've never seen an aircraft do? Because those are two different statements. And I'm 100% sure the skunk works and the Russians and the Chinese skunk works, or whatever they call it, have stuff that we don't know about yet, at least at our level. And maybe some stuff for each of those agencies that the other nations don't know about. So is it a good chance a UFO is something American-made or man-made that the general public doesn't know about? That would be my first guess. The guy from Ancient Aliens with the crazy hair, I forget his name.
Yeah.
I saw a meme with him, and he's got a tear coming down. It's like, when I realized that there's no aliens, because Trump would have been briefed on it, and there's no way that guy would have kept his mouth shut. Great meme. And I think Trump would have come out and said it at some point of, when he's getting fired and it's over, he's like, well, let me just, flip the chessboard upside down. There's aliens.
Yeah.
And
I don't think they briefed him on aliens.
That's the only thing. Yeah, maybe that's the only.
And that's the other scary thing is our president's not really in charge. Like right now, Biden's not running the country. Somebody else is. But if generals or agents are not telling the president of the United States that something is important to that, that's kind of terrifying on its own too. I do feel like they're softening us up for news, because they keep telling us little tidbits of like, maybe there's aliens, maybe there's not. They recently said the Webb telescope, they saw city lights on another planet in Proxima Centauri. They just announced that, like, no big deal. We saw city lights on a planet that's like 16 light years from here. And then it didn't even make news for more than a day. People are just like, whatever.
In general, I agree with Matt on most of this stuff. Here's the problem. It's very hard to prove a negative, right? If there really isn't information that something's going on, but of course the military is going to look into it, right? If there's the potential that there's some technology out there that we don't know about, or there are a lot of reports about something, it's not even a rounding error for the DoD to stand up an office to look at that. So something like that feels totally reasonable to me. Not indicative that there is necessarily something going on. Okay, you get little drips and drabs of information. Yeah, because there are anomalies, right? They literally observed or believe they observed some anomalies, that there's nothing behind them. It's essentially impossible to show that there's nothing behind those anomalies. And then you get stuff like, this report of, city lights on a planet, which is like, this is not truly something we can observe, right? Yeah, it's cool. It would be like super exciting to find out that there were UFOs coming here and extraterrestrials visiting us. As of now, to me, it doesn't feel like we know that. It feels like there's a whole bunch of stuff that's really cool to think about, and you can do a whole lot of fan fiction behind it, but it doesn't feel like there's anything like substantive.
Those are fair game, right? But both what Matt and Chuck said is absolutely fair. We just want to bring one thing that if we are to believe our men and women who are operating the radars off the coast of California and off the ships and doing exercises and our pilots, and if they're saying, hey, there's something out there that I've never seen before, that we can tell we're all tracking, that it's breaking the laws of physics. It's either two things or three things, right? It's either equipment malfunction, it's either they're full of shit, or it's either Chinese high-tech stuff, US high-tech stuff, or aliens, right? So like one of those three, all three are extremely concerning. You know what I'm saying? So
let's just refocus away from UAPs, because that's not the only thing. He's saying that they have crashed spacecraft. They've recovered non-human remains, like bodies of aliens. He says they have two alien spacecraft. One is the one that crashed in 1947, Roswell, New Mexico. He also says we are not alone. I think we basically all understand that now. He said that he has personally seen a technical device that was removed from a U.S. military person after an encounter with a UAP. The device acted bizarre when the military surgeon excised it from the patient, and the object tried to run away while he was cutting it out of the person. It was trying to go back in and like get away from the doctor. This technology. So, and Elizondo says he saw that. Now, what do you think about the bodies, this little object, or the spacecraft, and this little this little device?
I would back up a few hundred years to the Columbian Exchange when we came over here and then we went back to Europe. How much disease destroyed the Native Americans? I think if an organic life form from another planet landed here, without even war being waged, the E. coli or whatever their version of it is on their skin or in their gut, the random bacteria and viruses would probably devastate our ecosystem. Even if it didn't hurt us, their version of leaf mold might devastate our forests. And that's just...
Yeah. Yes.
So that speaks against that occurring. It could be they're silicon-based and something so incompatible that wouldn't happen. And that would also explain why they would die after their air capsule opened up. And again, I'm just spitballing this. I will say technology advanced very quickly after World War II. We got a lot of material improvements that we didn't have before, metal alloys, stuff that would have been complete fantasy and magic to somebody in the 1930s is every day now. I mean, stuff that Star Trek portrayed, we now have, and this is almost a tricorder and a communicator. You can do so much with an iPhone. Is that we have more people that are aggressively working with the scientific method, or are there engineers reverse engineering stuff and slow balling it out into the economy? And that's why the American economy has done so good, because we had Roswell. A lot of the guys that have spoke on this on Joe Rogan and some of the other well-reputed guys that have 20 plus years, they're saying that our use of the nuclear bombs in World War II is what brought the alien attention and the intervention. Again, that makes for a good story. I like hard truth. Great claims require great evidence.
They seem to, I've noticed this pattern, and then they seem to have, in this book, and the military scientists seem to understand it, they're attracted to nuclear activity, like nuclear bombs, nuclear aircraft carriers, nuclear weapons sites, missile silos. They fucking love that shit.
And I think the Russians and the Chinese would probably be interested in looking at that stuff too, right? In our nuclear technology. So there's a lot of explanations. I don't know. I feel like some of this, when you've got somebody making such salacious claims and they have a lot to get out of it. He just wrote a book. He's making, as we just talked about, some claims that are just, they go way past what has so far been said and are reasonable. I question all his motives.
what's the retirement pay for an O6 or G6 or whatever that gets out and has had 2 divorces versus how much can he make on a book deal where he says, while I was at Area 51, I saw XYZ.
Yeah. All right. So we don't know. All right. Let's do the military news. I got 3 topics. Let's try to just go around real quick and just do each of them. The first one is former chairman of the Joint Chiefs Staff, Milley, and former Google CEO Eric Schmidt, who's one of the leaders of this, American AI leaders, is trying to make sure that our country gets AI, especially vis-a-vis China, getting it before us. They wrote a joint paper or something where they said the U.S. is unprepared for AI warfare, that we're not ready for AI and drone warfare. And without reform, the U.S. will lose its military edge, which obviously I've believed this for many years. So who wants to go first on America losing its military edge?
I'm terrified of the genie in the bottle that we're going to let out. And I think it's not us versus China. I think it's humanities against AI. And I think we're going to create something that's going to be impossible to uninvent.
All right. Nice hot take. Shane, what do you think?
For the most part, I'm curious to just say what he means by unprepared, because John, we talked about this before. What I'm afraid of is that when I hear AI, I hear tens of billions of dollars that could go towards the pay of the enlisted and the officers, and instead it goes to corporations like Microsoft or Google, and it's mostly just kind of wasted away. And when they say they're making great advances and that we're helping out the military and we're pumping all this investment, and it just goes for shit, right? And so that's the kind of the biggest scare of it. I see where he's coming from. I think to that point, John, it's maybe China's a little bit ahead of us as far as AI, and they're able to use 1 million drones, right? And just overwhelm and saturate that stuff. And the drones are somehow AI programmed to be able to coordinate with each other, and that we don't have the defenses to be able to combat that. They may be ahead on that. They may not. Not 100% sure. I see that concern. So I understand the concern. And I think to your point, John, we need to focus in on that one. I think we also need to, as we talked about before, is that make sure that when we do focus in on it, we don't waste that money, that we actually get production out of it and tangible results, instead of it just being years on end and billions wasted.
Yeah. We don't want diminishing returns on our investments in AI. Yeah. Chuck, what do you think about this warning they put out?
If we look back at history, what you'll see over and over again is the people who maintain their positions are the ones who are able to effectively integrate new technologies. A lot of times the problem is not effectively integrating that stuff as it comes out and not figuring out how to use it in novel ways and unexpected ways, right? And we need to make sure we're focusing on that. I mean, this one is brand new, but like we talked about, over the course of the last 100 years or less, we've had such a rapid pace of change technologically. That stuff, for the most part, is just sort of layered over old techniques for conducting warfare. And maybe that's the right way to do it, but maybe it's not. If we are the best in integrating these technologies, especially things that have the potential power of artificial intelligence, the better position we'll be in.
All right. So the next military news is the Osprey crash. If you guys know, the CV-22 Osprey is the tilt rotor, airframe.
Tonight's other top story, the deadly crash today of yet another American Osprey aircraft. This one a U.S. Air Force plane on a training mission off the coast of Japan. Courtney Kuby has more for us tonight from the Pentagon.
Overnight, a U.S. Air Force Osprey crashed into the waters off Japan's southern coast with 8 U.S. airmen on board. Tonight, U.S. military officials say the remains of one have been found and that search and rescue efforts continue. The airmen assigned to the 353rd Special Operations Wing at Kadena Air Base in Japan were on a training mission when Japanese officials say the Osprey disappeared around 2:40 p.m. local time. The Osprey is unique, capable of taking off and hovering like a helicopter, then tilting its rotors forward to fly like a plane. But it's an aircraft with a troubled history. In August 2022, Air Force Special Operations Command grounded all 52 of its Ospreys for more than 2 weeks after clutches repeatedly malfunctioned. And deadly crashes with Marine Corps Ospreys as well, including 4 Marines killed when their Osprey crashed during an exercise in Norway last year, 5 more Marines killed just 3 months later in Southern California. And this August, a Marine Corps Osprey went down in Australia, killing 3 Marines on board.
One of them crashed last year in November off the coast of Japan, killed 8 Air Force Special Ops. And then in 2022, there was an Osprey that killed a bunch of Marines in Cali. What's happening is, we were talking about alloys before, the gearbox in the engine. One of the gears, there's an alloy in there they've had manufacturing problems with. They've known about this since 2013. And so what happens is, when it gets stressed out, that can break, and then it will break into pieces, and it breaks the other gears, essentially putting that engine down. There were like warning lights and stuff like that. Supposedly, it was considered common that these warning lights were ignored, because it was just a common operation of the plane that these gearbox warnings would be ignored. They've had other failures of these gearboxes, but essentially the planes landed before the gearbox totally exploded, and so the plane didn't crash. The CV-22s are down. They're not going to be operational again until mid-2025. Who knows if that's going to work? But basically, they knew about this. They knew about this, and people are still flying in those birds. I've flown in those birds. A lot of the Rangers and stuff have. And there's good things about them. Obviously, they're scary as fuck. And, but we shouldn't have, I don't know. I mean, I've just been in them when they've almost crashed, and it's just, it sucks. But if you're wounded, they come get you, and they fly you out there way faster than a helicopter. So that could save someone's life there. But they should have fixed this gearbox shit. It's bullshit that they were letting these people fly these planes around. They didn't have the proper training to know that this gearbox thing could happen. They knew that catastrophic failure could happen. The risks were not mitigated. And so all these families don't have their guy.
A good aircraft can lose all power and glide in. They call twin or single engine planes doctor killers for that reason. You're supposed to have a twin. That way, if you lose power to one engine and go down. The way the Osprey is designed, though, if you lose power to one engine, you're still going to go down, and often you'll do a very dramatic flip inversion and then slam into the ground. It is a catastrophic failure when it goes down. My friend Holly McKay, I introduced you to, she actually wrote an article about this a year ago when that happened. I'll link it in the comments. My question is, who knew what when, and why did they conceal it? I feel like maybe the guys riding on it don't need to know that stuff, but the pilots and the crews that take care of it, they need to know all that as soon as somebody knows something. If you remember in the movie Fight Club at the beginning, when they were on the aircraft, he was talking about how they choose to do a recall versus just settle. I think some politicians and corporate guys somewhere probably had a conversation years ago of, this isn't going to happen very often, and it's cheaper, as much money we have in this, the sunk cost bias. Let's just keep it rolling, and we're going to have some wrecks every few years, and not a big deal.
Boeing again with
yeah,
this.
And if that's the case, I'd like to see their heads on pikes. They'll probably get some middle-level manager or some Army officer that's retiring anyway and put the blame on them.
They said that when they did the analysis, that failure was improbable, but they admitted that the total loss of the aircraft is possible, right? So there's this catastrophic possibility, although improbable. But then they never trained the pilots to understand that this could be a problem so that the pilots could mitigate. And there's just this gap there. And it's like, whose fucking job was it to mitigate this so that these people didn't die? And it was somebody's job. It didn't happen. And the reason it didn't happen is because government fucking sucks. And this person is not the one who's going to pay the price. This government worker, this uniformed military, whoever the dickhead was that dropped the ball on this 10 years ago, fucking buried all these people. And it's just, and they just go on. So
I would say that's definitely a team of people buried that, not just one guy, but I'd like to know that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's somebody's fucking job. Someone should be responsible. Shane, what do you think?
Oh, John, we talked about this shit many times. Corruption and incompetence and price gouging. So what do we have? We got, first of all, I wanted to say we need to do old school Standard Oil, just bust them all up, just break up Boeing, break up all the defense firms. Even we had a study that the DoD came out and published itself, like one of the biggest national security threats is the concentration of corporations in the defense firm and the weapons suppliers, because there's only like 5 of them now. It used to be like 50 back 25, 30 years ago, right? But the monopoly power would come and do it, and the concentration of power. So now we've got Boeing, they're like, what are you going to do about it? Like, yes, we are going to make a financial decision that we are going to put a fairly mediocre aircraft into service, and we're going to make a profit off of it. And that anyone who speaks up about it, we're going to ruin you. We're going to make sure that you don't have a job. If you are a warrant officer who's flying this stuff and you talk bad about this bird, you're not getting a job with Boeing. You're not getting that 6-figure job coming out of there if you talk shit. So you shut the hell up. All right, and they crack it down all the way to, you think these flag officers are coming out and going to be talking shit against Boeing and say, hey, your birds are getting us killed? We can go back to the NRAPs. We can go back to the M16. We can go back to countless military equipment where honestly, in the end, it's not, these are American guys. They're not like, how do I get the service members, killed? Right? It's how do I maximize profits? It's okay, I need to put in this amount of material into the bird that it's going to last this long and it'll cost us X, Y, and Z versus the other. What do we look at the stress rate? How long that'll last us? It'll fail once in 1,000 times. Yeah, we can settle that and litigate that and then just go ahead and defer that and no one's going to get blamed for that. That happens in literally every industry. So I would say to address these fuckers who are getting our boys killed, break them all up because we know that is an issue. Break up every single defense firm out there. This is ridiculous. They're that big and they're getting away with murder because they know they can hide behind consultants and lawyers and they can litigate away for years on end. And while we're burying our fucking guys in Arlington, they're getting away with fucking $1 million golden parachutes and it's bullshit.
Chuck, what do you think?
This is a problem. I wish I could say I was like really surprised by this, or any of us were, surprised by this, but it's not that surprising. And this stuff happens all the time. There needs to be proper oversight. There needs to be proper risk analyses, right? I mean, obviously you're looking at something here that whether or not it's probable it will occur, it is catastrophic. Like when those two lines cross, this should be something that they're taking seriously and working to fix instead of just ignoring because it's not happening, which is kind of what it sounds like occurred, right?
It's keeping these people alive is important because people won't join the military because you just fucking killed these people, and so their brothers, their sisters, their town, everyone knows, and just whatever. Anyway, female draft. I personally don't like the draft. I think it gives them a way to they don't have to convince the young people to sign up. They can just be like, we're taking you, so I don't really like it. It's obviously unpopular. The defense bill continues selective service, so it basically continues as is. They're removing the word male, which would essentially put females in, and then they're also, I believe they're going to change it so that it's automatic. You're automatically enrolled in the draft. It's not something that you have to proactively do because, like, if they kept it proactive and they added the females, like most females would not sign up, and that would create all kinds of problems. So they're going to automatically enroll the young people. Myself, real quick, I want women in the military. I think that's fine and great. It's just, I think drafting women is insane. I think drafting men is insane. I could see a scenario where you would, but I think we can do away with it. But this female draft thing is dumb. So, Matt, what do you think? Female draft?
No, don't do it. I would rather adopt a Starship Troopers point of citizenship where you have to serve to get citizenship.
That's fascism, what you're referring to?
I'm service to the body politic.
Okay.
Most men that are 18 to 21 right now, I don't see being able to be draftable in any concept. Of the young people I've been around now, a few of them I think could go straight to RASP and do great. But there's some kids out there that I'm just like, and that's kind of a boomer, back when I was a boy, but seriously, something's changed in the new generation. The obesity is through the roof. The mental illness, the level of anxiety and ADHD and depression in young people is off the charts. I think RFK spoke in detail about this. Something has happened to our kids and we're not addressing it. We don't have enough people joining the military. Are we going to use illegals, or are we going to draft women, or how are we going to solve that? Or are we going to use AI and just a bunch of drones? But I think the guys in the rooms that are planning this stuff are realizing that we need more heartbeats or robots. And how do we get them? And this is one idea they've thrown out, and I think it's probably one of the worst ideas. I will not let my daughter get drafted, and I'll just leave it at that. My daughter's not going to get taken off to fight a foreign war.
That's the whole crux of the matter. What happens when they draft your mom or your daughter or your wife or your sister? It's like,
my sister can go. I don't care. But my daughter, no.
I'm 50-50 on this one, a little bit, centrist conservative. I would say, in the end, working in Intel, thank God we have women. They're way smarter than us. It's just the translators, the collections, the analysis. Sometimes they just look at us like we're just chimps. So, if we are drafting them, I would say I would ask that they be drafted into the intelligence, to the non-front line kind of units. I know that's a little boomer kind of mentality on that one, but there's been women who's been in front line and they've done, heroic stuff before. And I don't want that to be upset, but in general, I think that, where you need the front line, you just need men, not to disqualify women, but when I said that's why we have the Olympics, there's men who are better than other men. You just need a certain physicality. If women can meet that, then by all means. But for the most part, if we do have a draft, I would say they would be best used in the intelligence and, in the operational fields from that area.
If you're drafting, you're essentially drafting infantry. You need bodies. This is not, you're not drafting doctors you're not drafting intel people.
Well, by essentially, if you're pushing your men in the intel, you are drafting infantry. No,
but we're not drafting anybody right now, right? This is just registering for the Selective Service, which is probably an important point in all of it. And to that concept, like the way that a draft is implemented would be up to us, right? We don't have one right now. In the past, we would, yes, draft people essentially and put them straight into infantry. That doesn't have to be how it plays out. The Selective Service is there in case we get into a catastrophic situation where we need to draft people because we just don't have the manpower, the resources to conduct a massive scale war. That's what it's supposed to be.
Or people won't sign up. It could be just like a dissatisfaction thing. They're like, fine, you don't want to sign up for this war? Like you're like Vietnam, like a Vietnam trip.
Yeah, but that's not where we are. Right? And we should have political power to make changes when things like that happen, right? Again, like we can talk about the degree to which people can impact that stuff, but we can vote people out of office, we can make changes. We can cross that bridge as we come to it. But the idea, the Selective Service does exist. And if we did have a catastrophic situation, a messy overseas war or, a messy war where we needed all hands on deck in order just to continue to exist as a country, to me, we use every resource we have. And if we're talking about the, tremendous contributions that a lot of female soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, have made to the military and to national security, I want their contributions as well. I think we're certainly always.
You want to draft them though?
I don't want to draft me. I don't want to draft me. I don't want to draft my brother, my father, my son, right? I don't want anybody to have to get drafted. But if the country's going down without more resources and we simply need it for readiness.
But you have the rich people in control. You have the rich people in control of everything, and then they're going to start drafting all the poor people's kids, and then
but the draft exists, or the Selective Service exists today, John. Like it's not as if it doesn't exist.
I'm attacking it.
I hear what you're saying, but I think we're creating a scenario that doesn't exist, right?
From Athens until now, has any civilized country sent their women to war on the front lines?
Yeah, in national emergencies they do, and there's a lot of women in the Russian army too.
But volunteer.
Yeah, no, they volunteer. I mean, basically, it was like Stalin said, you either fight or I'm going to kill you. And that's what he did for his whole population. But the women, there were hundreds of thousands of female soldiers, and they were some of the best marksmen on the planet, and they did a tremendous job. I'm still against.
Those were all volunteer units, though, correct?
Oh, you're voluntold, right? It's either you fight or you die. Either Stalin's going to kill you because you're not fighting, or the Germans are going to kill you because you're not fighting. Either way, you got to fight, right? So when they did fight, they weren't doing the heavy lifting. They weren't hucking stuff around. They were in the back, being the snipers, doing a lot of good stuff. I'm not for it. I'm still somewhat on your side, Matt. But we do have to say, there are examples of all female units doing exemplary jobs out there.
Whether or not women are on the front lines is a totally different discussion than the one that we're having, right? We're talking about whether or not women should register for the Selective Service so they could be called up for some military service if it were a national necessity. We're not saying that, totally kind of a distraction to bring in whether or not they should be on the front lines, right? That is not what's written into this bill, and it is not what's on the table or being discussed.
Has any modern civilization from Greece till now had the draft for females?
I mean, I think probably the Soviets did. The Soviets were very gender equality, so they had a lot of female, but I don't think they were like the front stormtroopers. I mean, they were in the military, obviously.
They were just equal. There was no distinguish between them.
Yeah,
a lot of History Channel on that one, on World War II stuff.
Yeah.
We don't live in the Middle Ages now, right? We don't live in the 17th century. We are a different society now. We function differently, and different people have different roles. I think I understand where you're headed with that, but I'm not sure that it.
I would take 60 women from the Middle Ages that have been working in the fields as peasants over 60 females from anywhere in America right now. If I had to put a platoon together, I think they're way harder then than they are now.
Life was just harder back then.
Sure, they probably were stronger because they were out in the fields.
Churning butter and shit. Who fucking cares? All right. Well, that's the last topic. So why don't we go around and everyone can say goodbye? Shane, you want to say goodbye first?
This is fun. Always love, hopping on here, just getting other guys', just real perspective. Again, if you're watching this, take your input from multiple lenses, multiple perspectives, and multiple inputs and make your own informed choice. If you're going to listen to us dingbats, just talk. I think we make some good sense, good points and good counterpoints. And I love you got to get it from all perspectives. So Thanks for joining, y'all.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I think it was a good discussion. As always, there are, significant points of disagreement, but we also find, I think, some places where we are in violent agreement. That's the way I think real people are. So it's good to watch that play out.
Dr. Matt.
The truth is out there. Thanks, guys.
We are not alone. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching. It was a good show. And next week, we'll have another crew. So see you then. Bye.
Hey, y'all.